Hey, hello. Welcome back to the Sunday Serving Channel, where you come every week for words of hope and truth from the gospel. And don't worry, we're not going to be stuck inside for long. I do want to keep up with the tradition of giving the gospel sermon from out in God's nature. So, but today, we want to do that from the rooftops. And you'll see why soon. Come on, Remy, let's go. So let's get out here. Out here on this beautiful rooftop. Come on, Remy, let's get out of here. All right. So, what a lovely day. Sun is shining. We're on this roof right above our church. That's it, Remy. Come on out here. So, today, to go on the story of from Mark chapter 2. Come on. Hey. There we go. She's getting old. Okay, chapter 2 in Mark. It's my favorite miracle story from the Bible. Is this story of Jesus healing the paralytic. It says a few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come. They gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door. And he preached the word to them. So that's I find that interesting and compelling. Jesus was made famous not from his preaching, but from his healing people that were sick with leprosy, paralyzed, people with mental illnesses. He freed them, he brought hope, he brought healing. And that's what people were drawn to. They wanted change in their lives. But his interest, it says here, he preached to them. He wanted to bring them the message of the kingdom. You know, the Sermon on the Mount. It said some men came bringing to him a paralyzed man carried by 4 of them. So imagine this man, he's paralyzed, he can't move, can't walk, maybe he couldn't feed himself. But 4 of his friends cared enough about him to bring him on a stretcher to Jesus. And when they got to the place that Jesus was at and he was preaching, there was no room. It was so full of people they couldn't get inside. So to me, that's a real picture of love, of faith in action, really of community. The friends that worked with this man cared enough about him to, there were no electric wheelchairs in those days, to carry a stretcher with a paralyzed man and go find Jesus, hoping for this miracle of healing. So it says, since they couldn't get to him because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it. And they lowered the man on the mat that he was lying on. So imagine that. I mean, I guess the houses back in Jesus' time were a little different. They often had flat roofs with stairways going to it. But imagine them like getting up on that roof with the crowds of people underneath. I don't think they owned the house. And digging through the roof, which is probably, maybe some tarps and some thatch, probably some plaster, some mud. They would have to dig through that to make an opening big enough to lower this paralyzed man on a stretcher. Not only that, they'd probably have to figure out bringing 4 ropes, tying it to the corners, lowering this guy down without tipping him off. You imagine what he was thinking and saying? Can you imagine what all the people in the house were thinking if they're inside listening to Jesus maybe on a Sabbath, and all of a sudden there's this commotion and debris starts falling down from the ceiling? I wonder what the owner of the house thought. Maybe he thought he's being attacked. It doesn't tell us those details, but we can imagine them. And it says here, when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." So there, Jesus says when he saw their faith. So he's talking about the friends of this paralyzed man. Those 4 guys that carried him, those 4 guys that cared enough to dig through the roof expecting a miracle. I mean, they must have really assumed that Jesus was going to help them. Otherwise, I don't know if they would have gone through the trouble of destroying their neighbor's roof. Can you imagine lowering someone down after doing that and then Jesus not performing a miracle and then hauling the guy back up again? That'd be pretty tough. But here, what was Jesus' response? He said, "Son, your sins are forgiven." I wonder if when Jesus said that, I wonder if the air went out of the tire, so to say, of these guys and the room full of people, that instead of saying, "Son, you're healed," or laying his hands on him, "Son, your sins are forgiven." That's deep. Jesus knew what is the most important thing, the biggest gift of God. It is forgiveness. Our own sins, our own burdens, being forgiven of them is far more important. It has eternal value than healing of the body. But that's not so obvious. We tend to think of the body. We tend to think of the physical. But Jesus said, "Son, your sins are forgiven." It says, now some of the teachers of the law were sitting there thinking to themselves, "Why does this fellow talk like that? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" So that's the Pharisees' response. That's blasphemy. You can't just forgive someone's sins. Well, in a sense, they were right. Only God can forgive sins. But what they were wrong in is not recognizing that Jesus was the Son of God and has the authority to forgive sins through God. It says here, immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that this was what they were thinking in their hearts. So they were just thinking it. They didn't say it. He knew what they were thinking. And he said to them, "Why are you thinking these things? Which is easier to say to this paralyzed man, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up, take your mat, and walk'?" So he challenged them. Actually, forgiving someone's sin is far more difficult than healing them. But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. So Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man, not a king, not even God's Son, the Son of Man. I want you to know the authority that God has given to the Son of Man on earth to forgive sins. So he said to the man, "I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home." He got up, took his mat, and walked out in full view of them all. So there, the miracle of healing. So that you know the power of God to forgive sins. That's the reason Jesus healed this man. I tell you, get up, take up your mat, and walk home. He got up, took his mat, and walked out in full view of them all. This amazed everyone, and they praised God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." Well, if we truly imagine and put ourselves in that situation of the paralyzed man, of his 4 friends, of the people in the house, of the crowds around, of the Pharisees, what an amazing, dramatic story of healing, of forgiveness, of teaching us that forgiveness of sins is what's really important. But that goes along with healing. And in fact, there was an old Jewish teaching from the rabbis that said that if someone wants to be healed, their sins have to be forgiven first. So Jesus knew that, and he knew the doubt in their minds, and that's why he tied the two together. I'm convinced that that's the reason, and it also shows us today the importance of forgiveness, the importance of being free from sin, and how that will free up our minds, our bodies, and help with healing. And Jesus still has that power today to forgive and to heal. And the other beautiful thing about this story is that faith in action of this paralyzed man's friend, that points to community. It's a call to community. Do we care enough about our friends, about our neighbors, about our coworkers, to carry them, to bring them to Jesus, to even break through a roof at the risk of being arrested and get them the help they need from Jesus? So that's an amazing story. I hope you enjoyed it from this rooftop. It says we should proclaim the gospel from the rooftop, so here we are today after that powerful nor'easter swept through the whole East Coast here. And God bless you all. Have a wonderful day. I've got to get Remy safely off the roof. I don't think she's up to jumping. We might have to lower her down. Come on, Remy. We won't dig through the roof today. We would get some people upset.